Welcome back to Kent Art. It is so good to have my special guests here today. We have a really, really special show. This is, I think, a really significant event in the white well-being sphere. We're going to be doing a book review of Spencer J. Quinn's new book, No College Club. So I'm really excited because I did the artwork on that. And with us, we have Brant Danger of School of the West, who is an educator in the white well-being sphere. So let me first introduce Spencer. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, you've been doing a ton of promotion of this book lately. Every day I see new links. What shows have you been on recently?
First I was on the Pox Populi YouTube channel. He had me on Odyssey as well. Then the Writer's Block, that was Nick Gilvey and the Daily Zoomer came together and spoke about the book. And then I was on the Political Cesspool with James Edwards for about a half an hour. And that was great. And that actually aired this evening. And now I'm with you guys.
Cool beans. And without further ado, the mighty Brant Danger. Watch out. Sparks are flying. This guy is hot. So how you doing there, big man? Talk to us. What have you been up to with School of the West?
Well, first of all, I apologize for the hotness. I didn't mean for the sparks to fly.
Yeah.
And over the past fall, I taught some classes to students. The closed classes online, invitation only. And I'm going to take that material that I've been teaching over the past year, and I'm going to put that on the website. It's going to be changed slightly. Part of the material encompasses Jason Kuna's white well-being theories, and part of it is psychology, part of it is propaganda, understanding propaganda, part of it is history. And I'm going to have one course running for youth and then one course for teens/adult. It's going to be material that's appropriate for both of those. So anyway, that's what I'm working on right now.
Brilliant. Very, very happy to hear about all the great work that you do. Ladies and gentlemen, in the show notes below, there's links to School of the West, links to Spencer Quinn's work at Countercurrents. Spencer, if you could actually tell us a little bit about your work with Countercurrents. You do a lot of writing for them.
Yes. Well, I started with them in 2016, and I've been trying to be very productive, producing about an essay a week since then. I do mostly book reviews, or I'll just commentary on current events, or some deeper issues as well. And I've branched out late last year or late 2021. I started branching out into the Occidental Observer. I have maybe 9 or 10 essays with them. And while I've been doing that, I've been producing novels, and I produced one nonfiction work. This is my third novel, The No College Club, and it's my first young adult novel. And I also have a book on Alexander Solzhenitsyn called Solzhenitsyn and the Right, which was published by Antelope Hill. The No College Club, along with my children's book, My Mirror Tells a Story, were both published by the White People Press. And I'm hoping to make the No College Club a series. I've already started the sequel, and I hope to have many books in the series to come.
No, that's brilliant. As a former high school teacher myself, I feel that, having white positive novels for the young adult audience is like we're in desperate need of this. This is a desperately underserved market. They, of course, are really right in the crucible of all this leftist, anti-white propaganda, through the state school system, etc. So, coming out with books like this, they just have greater value than I think other things in some way, because we're finally touching on this audience that really needs assistance and help. So, I think the audience can see the connection here, having Brant Danger of School of the West do a book review for this. It's a really perfect situation here. So I guess we'll just jump right in. Brant, you read No College Club? Could you kind of get into it for us and let the audience know what you thought about it?
Well, I'm not really big on reading, so I just looked at the pictures and I tried to piece the story together from that.
Yeah, I should say that I did the illustrations, by the way, but
Yes,
yeah.
yeah, everything is fantastic. Well, I want to ask Spencer, how much of the plot are we allowed to discuss?
Oh, right. Well, I mean, the setup is perfectly fine. The milieu that the kids are living in, and the things they have to deal with, especially the anti-white stuff they have to deal with, is all perfectly fine. There's several chapters that take us back in time to the 18th century, and where we get to witness the life of an indentured servant. And we could touch upon that in more general terms, but I'd rather not bring up the mechanism that gets us there.
Right.
And of course, I mean, I don't want to give away the ending. But does that give you enough to go on, or do you have any further questions?
Yeah, perfect. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Well, first of all, the book is very interesting. I mean, the first chapter, we've got the main character, Caroline. She's being introduced. There's the setting, her life, her friends, the high school, and then right into chapter 2, bam! I mean, it just gets ramped up to 10. And there's not a lot of books that I've read in my life that I'm thinking about the book when I'm not reading it, and I want to get right back to reading it to see what happens. And this book, I actually felt that way about it when the conflict starts to be introduced, and you see how things are going to be set up. And there's many different subjects that Spencer brings up in the book, and it's entirely realistic because it's set in the modern anti-white narrative. It's a school which is going to have a typical mix of white and non-white students, white students that have been slowly replaced over time due to immigration in there, how they feel about it. Each of the 4 main characters are developed. I would say that the main character is Caroline, the pretty blonde there. And I think that this might be a bit more identifiable with some young women, some girls in this case, because they can identify with that character. So it's written in second person, but she's still the main character there. And then you have Derek there on the left in his little tattered shorts, and then Rose there in her yellow shirt, and then Brock there in the football jersey. And I like the way that Derek is used as almost like the anchor. He is the one with the intelligence and the intestinal fortitude and the mental sharpness to understand his facts, to back up his arguments. And he is not cowed by this anti-white teacher that he's inside, or that he's in whose class that he's in. And she's trying to, browbeat the children in the way that she wants to, as she brings up this topic of, you have to write a paper about slavery now, and I give you a book to read about slavery, and what do you have to say about that? And he didn't go along with that at all. He actually just spoke the truth. And so I'm going to ramble just a little bit more. I think one of the things that we're missing as a people, especially our youngsters, is they do not have an identity, because that's been taken away from them. That's been beaten out of them. It's been white guilted out of them. and they don't have any examples in their life, or fictional examples, TV books or anything, of someone who's actually standing up and going against the anti-white narrative. So with books like this, there's going to be examples of them to say, look, here's someone doing this. I can do this too. I can give myself permission to break outside of this anti-white narrative. I can give myself permission to follow the path of this person here, even though in this case it's a fictional person. It still gives people that permission slip in their life to start doing that, because as they look around, there's no wins anywhere. There's no examples of anyone doing this. Everyone is just completely cowed and going along with the system. So we have to have things like this that start to open the door to, pry open a crack a little bit, put in a little ray of sunshine. People can see this and go, oh, okay, here's an example of this. And like what Spencer said, he's setting it up so this is going to be the first in a series of books. So that's my opening salvo of sparks and stuff.
Thank you very much. That sounded great.
Thanks.
It's interesting. Just before the show, Brent and I were just chatting and literally talking about how we live in I was comparing it to the Jim Carrey film. What's the name of the film again, Brent? I'm sorry.
The Truman Show.
Truman Show. That we're in the anti-white Truman Show. You can't go to a doctor's office or turn the TV on or go shopping, or everywhere around you, either explicitly or implicitly, is an anti-white message. And I feel you can feel the intimidation in the air. You can feel the demoralization of whites in all of these environments. And it's a horrible feeling. I think that there's people that are like consciously, aggressively ignoring it, and trying not to notice it. And then of course there's leftist anti-whites that are like rooting it on, and rooting on our replacement and all this garbage. So books like this are really important. And I feel like in our sphere we have lots of content for adults, but like almost nothing for young people. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the origins. And of course, we're going to get back to the book review, but I just want to maybe dig into the origins of this, Spencer. And how did you come up with this idea? How did it all fall into place?
Well, I was Greg Johnson in he sent me some letters, some questions for a printed interview that I was to respond to for Countercurrents regarding My Mirror Tells a Story, which was my children's book that I wrote, and this is for little kids. The sort of book that a mom would put the child on her lap and you would read it to them. It rhymes. It's that kind of thing. And one of the first questions was, had you ever thought about writing a young adult novel? And at first I said, no, I hadn't thought of it. And I'm like, I have no time for that. And because my two previous novels were very grown up novels. I was in my mind, here I am trying to, best Dostoevsky. That's my goal. I'm trying to be the greatest novelist who ever lived. I'm trying to do better than Moby Dick, right? I mean, that was what I was attempting. And so then I thought about it. And I'm like, well, wait, why not? Why not do a young adult novel? I mean, this is it's a good idea. It's what we need. It's what the people need. I'm sure there's going to be a market for it. And there's also, I have to admit, there's a little bit of self-interest there, because I'm like, well, who would be my competitors? No one. I would be, blazing a trail here. Wow. I mean, actually, that's not true. Actually, Ash Donaldson wrote some pro-European or pro-white young adult novel. I think 2 or 3 of them, and so he's the first one. But I haven't heard much from him recently. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I thought that there would be very little besides Ash and me. But most importantly, though, it's just I had a feeling, it just felt right, and I just knew that we need this sort of thing. This is something that is crucial. And as for the specific idea, I had been studying some indentured servitude in America, especially when I read They Were White and They Were Slaves by Michael Hoffman, recommended by Jim Goad years ago. And so I had indentured servitude on the brain at the time, and I'm thinking, well, why don't I incorporate all that research I did into the storyline? And that, but then it has to be for kids, and it has to be, you know, a young adult book. So I thought, okay, well, I'll have these four friends who go back in time, or they meet a ghost, they have a detective mystery. You know, that's how it all started at first, because I'm thinking genre, and then none of that really worked. But I took the parts of it that I really liked and I kept it. And then I said, no, I'm going to write what you know, right in the current day. And so that's what I did. I made it a modern day story. And then once I decided on the four characters, everything just flowed very naturally. And I'm very happy with the results.
Phenomenal. Yeah, you're writing. So just if people would like to go back into my channel, there's interviews with both Brant and Spencer. And also, Spencer's been on Conversations with the Wind, which is by Nullis, who's in the chat right now. So there's quite a lot of information out about the books you've put out, and they're phenomenal books. So I want to pass the mic back to Brant, though, and let him continue with the book review.
Oh, thanks. I just want to say a couple of things. My mirror tells a story that Spencer wrote that he alluded to. I use that in my course for the youth, and what I do is I have an overhead camera with that, and at the beginning of the classes, when I start to talk about the identity and what Western kind means, that's one of the books that I use. And this is an example that kids can relate to because it's within a school setting as well. And so you have these fairly well-mannered little white boy and white girl, and you know, you can see they have a strong family. And then they go to school, and you have all these kids that are not like them. They're running around, making noise, throwing crap, you know, playing different games at recess and whatever. And the message in there is that, look, we're different than these other people, and it's okay that we're different, and we recognize that, and we want to do things in a certain way. They want to do things in a certain way. And then later on, you know, they meet some other little white kids that they can play together happily, and they're not being mean to anyone else. They're not judging other people. They're just finding an identity right there. And I think it's a pretty important book. So I always use that.
Thank you very much. I'm loving all of this. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. One other thing I want to point out as well, because my philosophy is to champion and cheer for everyone in all of our our camps that sometimes they argue with each other, etc. I don't look to argue or to criticize people. I just want to uplift people when I can, and point out when I see analogies or similarities. And when I was reading this book at the beginning, I felt very similar to when I read Jason Kuna's Crucible book when he was in the 7th and 8th grade. Now, Jason's book is a nonfiction, so it's slightly darker and a little grittier than the No College Club here, but it has that same type of like excitement and danger. When you have someone standing up to the system, you have a child standing up to authority, and the backing of the entire school system and the rest of society. So it's an impressive feat. It's exciting to see. And the way that Spencer writes his characters, it's extremely realistic, and you become engrossed in them. And so in my mind, at least right now, I haven't read any of Ash Donaldson's work. Crucible and the No College Club, it's definitely stuff that either if I can't somehow incorporate it, then I will definitely refer to those in the classes that I do for teenagers and say, look, you need to develop an identity. You need to have an example of what you can do. Here's 2 sources that you can look at right now.
Awesome sauce.
The Ash Donaldson book you can start with is called Blut and Boden.
Okay, I've heard of that.
I'm going to pull up some of the illustrations from the book now. Of course, we were just looking at the cover, and I just have a couple posted on my website, kent-art.weebly.com, and here's a few images. There's lots of, I should say, there's kind of like 2 timelines in the story, right, Spencer, where you have like the present moment where there's the kids dealing with the drama of coping with the anti-white system, And then there's these sort of flashback images of an earlier time that are actually illustrating a time when whites were sold into slavery. Can you maybe give us a little bit of information about that and how it ties into your story?
I don't want to have too many spoilers, but yes, the basically the plot of the story revolves around this assignment that these four students have to do for their history class, and the teacher, being this 1619 project woman who's very anti-white, the project has to be on slavery, quote unquote slavery, and she's so complacent that she doesn't say what kind of slavery. She just says slavery, assuming all the slaves in this country were black. And so the students are actually going to, these four students are going to do that, and they're making an effort to do this, when by chance they stumble across a pretty interesting, pretty amazing finding that demonstrates that especially during the colonial period, quite a few, as in hundreds of thousands of whites, were brought here as de facto slaves. They might have been called indentured servants, but they were in effect slaves. And because they were so cheap, and because they were expected to only serve for 7 years or 5 years, 7 years, whatever, their supposed owners had no incentive to treat them well. And so in many cases abused them horribly, to the point where they either died while they were still in their servitude, or when they would get out of servitude, they'd be so racked, their bodies would be destroyed, that they would not be able to do useful work, or they would be, for some reason or another, whatever infraction that their owner claimed they committed, they would not be given their freedom dues, or their freedom, they would quibble over the freedom dues, not give them very much, or it would be such a pittance that they would not be able to really live on it very well. They would have to work some more, of course. And then, sometimes they would get land, but land was useless if you couldn't survey it, and surveying it cost a ton of money. So the system had a way of keeping folks down, and it was pretty horrible. According to Don Jordan and Michael Walsh in their book White Cargo, it's hard to say exactly how many, but they say hundreds of thousands of white indentured servants died before their terms were up. And this is from the earliest colonial period until the 19th century. And it was pretty horrific. So, of course, there were people there who it wasn't so bad for them. But then again, there were some black slaves who didn't have it so bad either, relatively speaking. So there's good and bad in everything. And so they discover this, and they have a choice to make. These students, they say, well, okay, are we going to turn in this, politically correct project, do exactly what the teacher who hates us, do what this teacher who hates us, we want to do what she expects us to do and wants us to do, or do we stand up for ourselves and go down this new path, which would defy her directly and get us in big trouble? What's their choice? And the chapters, 5 chapters dealing with this indentured servant that they learn about, takes us back in time to this indentured servant who they learned about in their discovery, just basically relays much of what I've just explained to you, except in a narrative form, with a plot and a story in and of itself. So it's a story within a story that the reader reads about at the same time that the characters read about it and learn about it. And then, in the end, they use that information to bring the story to a climax.
Phenomenal. Just today on Twitter, I came across an actual video. It was difficult to say where it was. It looked like possibly Mexico or someplace in the jungle in Central America. And there were some masked men, and they were haggling over money. And the camera panned around and showed little children tied up and tied up to a post, and their mouths were masked, and they couldn't talk and move. And this is real human trafficking going on today, now live in real time, in God knows how many numbers. And I think about the industry of the anti-white slave narrative. So think about this. I mean, you've got college professors, you've got book deals, you've got articles in every day coming out in all kinds of media, on and
Hollywood
on.
movies. Don't forget
Hollywood
Hollywood
movies.
movies.
We're being bashed over the head incessantly over and over. Whites are bad because of slavery. Meanwhile, real slavery is happening all over the world, and all of that energy, all of that money, all of that time, and etc., is diverted away from it and focused on us and then I always try to bring back the topic of, like, whites are the only ones that ended slavery.
Right.
It's just
Well,
this
the thing is,
absurd. Go ahead.
the thing is that you should never believe the left at its word. And this is something I told Lipton Matthews in a talk we had a little while back. The left says it's about slavery, or they're really concerned about slavery, but slavery is happening right now in
Yeah,
Africa and South America and other places, and they're not lifting a finger to stop it.
exactly.
They would rather focus on destroying a form of slavery that was abolished in a war that killed 600,000 people 170 years ago. That was the result of a nation that is now defunct, the Confederacy. That to them is much realer and much more real and much more urgent than taking on real live traffickers and real live slavers today. They don't
Yeah.
care about that. So it's not really about slavery. It's
No.
not really it's not about any of that stuff. It's about power. They just see a weakness in white people where we will feel guilty very easily. We're sort of spoiled by our own prosperity, and we're much of our history has been hidden from us, and so they find ways to control the way we think through education and media, and they do
Yeah.
that in such a way to gain power for themselves. That's all it is, to gain power without having to earn it. That's their modus operandi.
It's amazing how just in 60 seconds you just destroyed their entire empire, of like this
Really, I didn't want to go past 45. Darn it!
Well, work on it. Okay, we're gonna get
All right.
get your training on that one there. But and I mean, it's just so wonderful that we have our people in the white positive sphere. We have creators like you. We have people like Brant creating education. We have such a huge, long journey ahead of us against it's David and Goliath. It's just a massive journey. But anyway, that's why we're here to talk about it. So back to Brant. What were some of your impressions about the characters and how they coped with being in an anti-white education system?
I think what Spencer did a great job of is showing how much doubt they had and how much fear there was in possibly standing up to the anti-white teacher, because they even enumerated all the different ways that they can be punished. I'm going to lose my friends. People are going to unfriend me on social media. I'm going to get kicked off the wrestling team. I'm going to get kicked off the football team. I'm going to lose my scholarship. I might get kicked out of a high school. I'm going to get attacked by these non-whites in the hallways. I mean, all of these things, which actually does happen. So it's a fictional account, but it's also very realistic, because Spencer is bringing in, okay, here's what happens to our people. So I think what's important, again, I want to keep harping on this, is that you see these characters, they're very relatable, 2 males, 2 females. They're full of doubt. They have trepidation, but the one character, Derek, he starts to lead the way because he's not apologizing. He's not bending. He's already been through a bunch of stuff in his life. He's had issues with his dad, getting killed inside the military. He's already been, to the magic shows and looked behind the curtain. He's not putting up with any crap anymore. And he's got to that point in his life while he's still in high school. So he can set the example for having courage, of being steadfast. He gives courage to the other kids who secretly agree with him, and then they can all come together, and they still get pressure. They get pressure from their parents. The mom of the popular girl says, "You have to stop doing this right now. I'm really disappointed in you. I might lose my job. I'm getting talked to," all this kind of stuff. So the pressure builds and builds and builds, but yet they stay with it. And this is what we have to do as a people. There's going to be tons, mountains of shit pour down on top of us for what we're doing. Just have to stay with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It all really just boils down to being faithful to the truth. Like I don't know how to be anything other than truthful. I can't live in this lie. I understand that people are propagandized, that they're hypnotized really by all this weird anti-white media, and they're grotesquely ignorant about their own history, their own identity, and it gets worse and worse as the generations come up in this. So the odds are really quite enormous. But again, the truth is the truth, and it's the light of day, and it can't be undone. It can't be covered up. You can't destroy the sun. It is what it is. So it's our mission. It's our duty to do what we do. And I have to say, it's not just us, right? It's the audience. It's the support for the arts. It's the support for education, the support for the media. There's a huge amount of people coming into the White Art Collective right now. I'm going to be featuring them on and off on my show in the coming year. I'm always here to work with you guys anytime we want to do shows, promotions, projects, etc. But the thing is, in a sense, it's really on the audience to embrace that, to buy the books, to get the word out, to share the links, to, in a sense, that's a kind of activism in like the easiest sense of the word. You know what I'm saying? Whereas like these kids are facing terrible crisis in their families and in the schools and the intimidation, and I think it's wonderful the way that they stand up against it. But at the same time, they're not, there's nothing really negative. They're not sort of villainous in their behavior. Maybe Spencer, you could go into a little bit about that approach.
Well, one thing is that one thing I wanted to touch upon is the trope that you often find in romance novels, where the good girl falls in love with the bad boy, and there's sort of an allure there. And I sort of play with this because Derek in many ways is the bad boy, even though and we know and he knows that he's honest and honorable. He's shoved to the periphery because he's been known to not buckle to the anti-white narrative, even as a young kid. Like he has a confession where he has this bad reputation because he at one point used the N-word against some black kid when he was a freshman. But when this was being discussed, it's like, but wait a minute, this kid was a thug and he was kicked out of school. And then later on, you hear Derek's side of the story, and Derek says, "Yeah, I did call him that," and the kids are shocked to hear that because you're not supposed to say that word. And of course, I don't use that word. The narrator does not use that word in the novel. The novel is a very it's a squeaky clean book, but they say, quote, the N-word, unquote. That's what they say. And Derek says, "Yeah, but he called me a redneck first, and a few other things." And suddenly, oh, okay, yeah. So he does have a side of the story, right? So he has this kind of outlaw reputation among the other students, and he's a loner, and that also gives him a sort of allure. But when he is standing up to the teacher and he knows as much, if not more, about the material than she does, that really sends Caroline into some contradictions in her mind because, she's suddenly really drawn to him. He's very attractive, and the what he's doing, she's drawn to this bad boy aura that he's got. But her mind, it's not just her heart, it's her mind too, because he's actually making sense when he stands up to the teacher, and she has to balance that with, well, I have all these friends. I'm really popular, and I want to stay in school and go to college. So what do I do? And that, I think, is a nice twist on the romance novel trope that you see in a lot of other stories. And Brant, I don't know if you caught this, but one of the literary models I used for Derek was Huck Finn. That's one of my favorite books. And Huckleberry Finn, although it's sort of like the carbon, or like the mirror image of Huck Finn, because it's like the opposite, because Huck Finn decides he's going to be an outlaw. Why? Well, he's going to be shepherding Jim to freedom. right? Which is against the law, which is against, you can't do that. And finding escaped slaves, if you if you were trying to help a slave escape, you're going to be in big trouble.
Yes.
And so at one point, Huck Finn, this is one of my all-time favorite moments in literature, where Huck Finn says, he realizes he's got a decision to make. This is a boy, 12, 15, whatever he is. He says, I got to make a decision. Do I do the right thing and help this man gain his freedom, or do I stay within the boundary of the law? And he says, well, I'm already an outlaw, so if I'm going to be an outlaw, I might as well go whole hog about it. I might as well go whole hog. That's the word. That's the word Twain uses. And there's a scene where Derek does the same thing. I mean, that's the one moment that I kind of rip off another writer, but it's more of a homage than anything. I just said, Derek says when finally the No College Club forms, and they're like, okay, well, we're going to do this after all their doubts and their worries and stuff. When they go to Derek and ask his side, he says, well, look, I'm already an outlaw. So if I'm going to be an outlaw, I might as well go whole hog.
Brant?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great device. And no, I didn't catch that with Huck Finn because I didn't know Huck Finn that well. But I'll pretend. I'll go ahead and say that I caught that. Yeah, I caught that. Yeah, I know all that stuff. I read every book. I don't know. I had something in my mind earlier. Okay, I remember what I was going to say. It's both something that Spencer said and something that you said, Donald. When you're talking about the activism of people, and when something like this is created by Spencer, and Spencer's talking about these are not technically outlaws. They don't do anything outside the law. It's a squeaky clean novel, and it is. And I think one of the reasons why that's important is because it's presentable to people within the morality that they have. Because as we know, our people have been propagandized so heavily and for so long, they don't know up from down. They don't know what the hell is going on. Yeah. And so our naivety and our morality as white people has been taken advantage of. And so our people think that it's moral to place the well-being of every non-white on the planet above themselves. You should destroy yourself and your civilization to help out non-whites who are not able to build what you build. So that's the morality where a lot of people are coming from to begin with. So you can't just come right out with a bunch of people that are out and out villains, or you can't play the villain in the anti-white narrative like Jason Kuna talks about. Like, here's a bunch of people who dress up as Nazis and they go around, I don't know, hitting people with sticks or whatever. You can't do that. Plus, it's also unrealistic and it's a dumb story. So when you have a story like this that Spencer has crafted, it makes sense. It's moral. It's believable. These characters serve as role models for kids. And also one of the things that Spencer talked about is the character Derek. When he was given the assignment by the anti-white teacher, he knows the material better than her. He takes it seriously. He's smarter than she is. So she can't out-argue him, and she gets extremely upset. But again, he doesn't back down because he knows that he's right, and he's not going to put up with her crap. He sets an example for the other kids. And everything that they're doing is basically wholesome. And if we had these four characters put back in the 50s and Spencer was writing a book about these four characters back in the 50s, they wouldn't have to be going through all this bullshit to begin with. They would just have these normal high school lives in the 1950s. It's just that you have these good kids and they're put in this modern anti-white time period now. So it's a moral book. So it's appropriate to give to people that are kind of on the fence, or they're vagues, or they're normies, or they don't really know. Or, give it to a teenager, a niece, a nephew, someone like that, someone that it can connect with.
I think if I can jump in quick, this is good ammunition for white teachers that want their kids to wake up as well. And now we all know that the education system is profoundly Marxist and feminist, and but there are teachers out there that are not sort of poisoned by that indoctrination. And I think that these specific teachers that are trying to fly under the radar and etc., they would love a book like this. So yeah, it maybe they could get in some trouble for having it. And that's the contradiction, because you go to the bookstore or the library and they have a pile or a section that says banned books. These are the naughty ones. Like they were banned, and they don't have.
I hate that, Donald. I hate that so much when they're like, "Oh, look, To Kill a Mockingbird! Wow, what a rebel!" I'm like, well, yeah, why don't you put the White Nationalist Manifesto on your list? That's banned too,
That's a great book.
My first novel, White Like You, was banned by Amazon, so I guess I should go on that list too, right? Yeah, that'll be the day.
See, there you go. I mean, that's a whole parody, I suppose, in itself. Is like, the true banned books, and they would be, all of Antelope Hill, for example, or et cetera, et cetera. So I find this very interesting that we're actually really dealing with these things, but I feel like, once again, it's ammunition. That's not really the word I'm looking for. It's sort of like, seems a little violent ammunition, but it's something that white teachers can use, obviously, to moralize their kids, to show them, look at what these kids dealt with, look at how they're actually dealing with real history, look at how they're standing up to their ignorant anti-white Marxist teachers, and then the I don't know how to say it, like the strength and heroism of it, really, but within that kind of like teen experience, that teen high school experience. That's why I really feel this book is very special. It's very unique. There's nothing out there that like it that I know of, and I'm like, of course, I'm going to pat myself on the back for having the opportunity to draw the illustrations. So thank you, Spencer.
Well, you were awesome. I mean, I was extremely thrilled with the final result. What you were saying though, is interesting in the sense that you want to have you say ammunition for teachers, but for the students as well. So, for example, the teacher talks about white privilege. White privilege this, white privilege that. And when Derek stands up to the teacher and he's asking reasonable questions, I mean, he's not being a jerk. He's not being insulting or anything like that. He's defying her, but he's doing so in a way that, follows the Marquis of Queensberry rules. He's not lobbing ad hominems or racial slurs or anything like that. He's just being completely fair with his questioning. And, then she can't, of course she can't, as Brant said, she can't out argue with him. So she decides to kick him out of the classroom to go to the principal's office to, exercise her authority. And he says, no. And he says, you can't do that. And she says, yes, I can. He says, no, you can't. I have white privilege. You just said so yourself. I have white privilege. So because I have white privilege, and you said to everyone here that I have white privilege, that means you do not have the right to kick me out of here because I have white privilege. And she's like, get out of here. And he's like, well, I guess I don't have white privilege then.
That was the first illustration I did for the book. Remember him like dragging his book bag past the teacher, and she's in her like African garb with a big afro, and she's all pissed off, and the students are like, holy shit, what just went down? So
actually the size of the afro and the thing she had on her head, I think, was your idea. It was, that looked really great.
Yeah, it's the kind of the fun part of this work is being able to interpret or add something of my own ideas to it. So that was cool.
There was a couple times, Donald, where I had to change the text to match your art.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
Maybe 5 or 6 times, where you put in a detail in the art that was so cool that I'm like, but it wasn't in the text.
Actually,
and I'm
remember.
Like, or it contradicted the text, and I'm like, no, I got to make it match the art. So I actually changed the text to make, I don't know, the details, that kind of thing, like visual details. It was perfect.
I'm such a pain in the ass to work with. I'm so sorry.
No, it was great.
That was a really awesome process too. I mean, this is just, it's like, the making of version here with you and I going back and forth and having these big conversations on, over the phone. Like, so this is what's going on. This is how it's got to feel. This is her experience.
Right.
I'm like, in a way, I'm like thinking like a film director. Okay, I want the mood to be this way. Where's the camera? What are the reactions? How am I going to design these new characters? What do they look like? So I really feel like illustrations bring a great deal to a story. I feel like they go hand in hand. Really nice. For you, Brent, what was your experience throughout the book, having just some visuals to go by?
I love that. I absolutely love visuals in a book, and it gives it a much more I'm trying to think of more like a familiar, happy, kind of like warm, childlike feeling. I don't have the right words to describe it. It's almost like it makes the material safer. It's like it's a graphic novel. It's a comic, because I grew up reading comics a lot when I was a kid.
You're my
So I
man.
so I like to see that. And when I was a kid, like probably like a lot of other ones, every little frame of a comic, you devour everything inside that frame, every
Right.
teeny tiny detail, and then you go back and you read the comic like 6 times the first day you get it. And so I feel the same way about the illustrations in this, and other books like that. It makes it more, I guess, maybe relatable. The characters are relatable. They're friendly, and also it goes back to what Spencer said. It's kind of like a squeaky queen,
That's
squeaky
my new
clean.
comic book villain, Squeaky Queen.
Yeah,
Watch
the
out.
villain, Squeaky Queen, enters the building. No,
That person would have to be in drag for sure.
I was just going to
That's
say,
right.
she'll be reading stories at the library later.
Squeaky
so-
Queen is going to come talk to your little kids
Yeah.
at 11 o'clock in the library.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it makes it presentable. It makes it familiar. We're familiar with looking at nice illustrations like that. Here's happy, normal people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was I've said this before. Tony Vermont of the White People Press and we could have published this thing 8 months ago or 10 months ago, because the text was ready. John Morgan finished the editing, and I put the final touches on it March of 22, and we could have just gone right ahead and just published it then and there and had it out by summer. But I thought, no, I really, really want to go the extra mile with this. I want to make this a really valuable product. I want people to have it in their hands and realize that a lot of love went into it, a lot of work, a lot of craftsmanship, a lot of care. Yeah. And I realized, okay, well, and I always had snippets of images in my head. I thought, okay, that would make a great image. Mm-hmm. And so I just wrote them all down, everything I had. And that's when I called Donald. And I got the okay from Tony, and then I called Donald, and I was like, yeah, you want to do this? And I really wanted it to be something special. And you're right, Brant. I mean, when I would read those classic novels from the 19th century, like Captain's Courageous or Huck Finn or what have you, they would always have these chapter sketches, and these weren't masterpieces or anything. They were just chapter sketches, but I loved them. They just brought the that gave me such a wonderful feeling, like a nice warm feeling that when I was a kid reading that stuff. It's sort of like harkened back to when I would read comics. It just was a great thing, and I wanted to impart that to my readership. Another thing, did you guys see the print interview I did with Countercurrents just the other day? If you can bring that up, Donald, I don't know if you can.
I will. Yeah.
But there, I actually talk about our process of working together, where I would actually give you a sketch. So we did 25 sketches, not including the cover. So we did 25 sketches, and I gave him 25 sketches. Of course, I'm a lousy artist. I can't draw, but I can draw well enough to get the ideas across. And I actually shared in my interview my image of you scroll down and you'll see it. One of my images, and then Donald's final product next to it. You may want to scroll up. So just to show what Donald was working with, which wasn't a whole lot. No, that's the review, I think. Is that the review? Or is
it's a review.
Yeah, that's the review. The interview took place a couple days later. So if you go to Countercurrents, yeah, and then go to scroll down like 2 or 3, and it should be there. There it is.
Okay.
So if you open that, you'll see my original art, which Donald. There you go, right there. So go ahead and click on that. Yeah, there. So that's what I did on the left, and look at the difference between a rank amateur and a pro. I mean, this is impressive.
So, Spencer, which one is yours? Is yours the picture on the right or the picture on the left?
Yeah. I did the art too. That's all me.
Spencer's going to steal my job. He better. I told him that. You better not steal my job with all this good art.
But Donald did say that I gave him enough to go on. It made the job easier for him, and that was my whole purpose. Because if I just said everything in words, it wouldn't work. So.
Mm-hmm. that it was very, very helpful to have that. And then, like here you have the editing where like, okay, we want to close up on these two guys. They just got beat up or in some kind of fight for the views that they hold. And so we need to get a little closer to see the injuries, see the girls' expressions on their face. It's really all about drama. It's storytelling, so we had a really cool process going on there.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
Donald,
great.
I mean, in book 2, I'll be giving you a call.
All right. Well, my number.
Okay.
That's pretty cool. I wanted to actually give the audience a minute or two if they have any questions. You guys, how many? Let's pop this one on right here. Slots, a very, very good friend in our community. He's here in the chat, and I just want to welcome him and everyone else. So he says, how many illustrations, Spencer? What is it, 25?
Oh, well, 26 if you include the cover.
All right. There's
And the illustrations for the historical chapters are way different than the illustrations from the modern day. The modern day illustrations are more comic style art, and if you scroll down in the interview, you'll see what I'm talking about. If you hit back and scroll down, the difference between the modern day art, which is very much like comic art today, and then the framed and cross-hatched, very nuanced. There you go. That's the modern day one, and
I'll zoom in on what you were just talking about. So here you see, it just meant to look a little more like an etching in a way, that kind of again, like you said, all the hatching in there to give it some kind of quality. But this is sort of the modern, and the frame, of course, so that it looks as if you're looking at a picture. This is actually the teacher I was referring to with that hairstyle. And
very
I think I don't really know if it was my idea or yours to have that, like the sort of the pro Africa thingy on her there. Of course, the huge hoop earrings and the long nails and little things like this to just.
Well, I prefer the term talons. Those are talons. They're not nails.
Yeah, that works. So you can really feel the tension here. The kind of disgruntled look on his face. The girls are like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" I think our female heroine here, she's a little Twitter-pated. Maybe it's like
puppy love going
hero,
on.
there goes my hero, So and here she's got her leopard pattern thing on her hair and such. So it was fun to do these things. And like the main characters were all Spencer. Like he had very, very clear ideas. Like, for example, our girl who loves riding horses, she's got these kind of funny pants with these like vegetables on them, and her shirt has the horse and the glasses. I sort of think of her as like the Velma of the group in a way. That's my personal take.
Actually, that question that was brought up by by Nick Gilvey and Daily Zoomer. They said that the characters as rendered in your art reminded them of Scooby-Doo. And I hadn't thought of that. It didn't even occur to me. And I'm like, oh my God, maybe it was subconscious. I don't know. But I'm like, oh, there's some truth in that. I hope that's a good thing. I really do.
I think it's iconic. I think it works really well. To have like a I don't know, white positive Scooby-Doo. How cool is that? Let's call the Warner Brothers and get a cartoon going right away. Okay. I'm trying to see if there's any more questions out here. We've got one from Slots here again. What challenges did you face, and how did you overcome trying to communicate the perspective of the opposite sexes? So this is actually something I struggle with in writing. Is like, I'm a man, right? So like to write a woman character and what would she say and how would she say it, you really have to have a kind of an acting mind. What was your approach to that, Spencer?
Oh, I just had to channel my inner Flaubert and Tolstoy, basically. No, seriously, I don't know. It's just the idea came to me to have a female protagonist. My previous novel, Charity's Blade, had a female protagonist. But that's a dystopian war book in many ways. Whereas this, this is much different. So I know that girls and women read this kind of fiction more than boys and men do. Boys and men tend to be interested in, if not comics, then they're interested in like military fiction or sci-fi or dystopian stuff, and they're less interested in dramas that happen in the modern day. And well, girls gobble that stuff up. So I thought, well, if I'm going to write a YA novel and I don't have it from a girl's perspective, at least the book one, then I'm going to be playing catch up, because it's going to be a harder sell for boys than it is for girls. So, although there's a lot here for boys, don't get me wrong, there's plenty here. Those two boys, Brock and Derek, are man's men, and they're tough kids. So there's a masculine aura to this book as well.
Yeah.
So I decided to make it a female character, and for me, people are people, and she's a composite of a couple girls I used to know years ago, and once I get a lock on their character, whether it's male or female, once I get a lock on their character, the rest flows pretty naturally. And I'm I could say, no, yeah, Caroline wouldn't say that, and Rose definitely has to say this, and Rose has to do that, and Caroline, it's just like you internalize their character, you internalize the characters, and then everything flows naturally. And it doesn't really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman or a boy or a girl.
I think you could just imagine hanging out with friends, and if a certain thing happened, that this friend would react this way and that friend would say that, and
right.
It's almost natural in a way. So there's another question here. How did you keep your writing grounded without becoming distracted by your own response to what you write? That's a very sophisticated question.
Interesting. Yeah, well, let me think about that. Well, first of all, I mean, I have a dual career. I'm an essayist and reviewer for Countercurrents and the Occidental Observer, right? So all my critical stuff goes there. All my analytic stuff goes there. I have an outlet for it. I'm not using fiction as my only outlet for everything, where I'm getting on my soapbox and boy, you're going to hear it from me, because I'm so awesome. I mean, it's not, I don't approach fiction that way. You can go to Countercurrents and read my opinionated ass all you want, and that's great. And you can love me or hate me, you can agree or disagree, and that's what I'm there for. But when it comes to fiction, the way I ground myself is I keep my goal is to entertain. I want to make the reader wonder what's going to happen next. I want people 1,000 years from now to read this book and say, what's going to happen next? I want aliens to come to this planet in 3,500 years, whatever, find this book, read it, and say, wow, what's going to happen next? I want to take it beyond the here and now. Okay, that's my goal. And so once I sort of subvert, I mean, I subsume myself to the story, and I do what's best for the narrative. I do what's best for the character arcs. And that's how I keep myself grounded. I don't worry about how I would react, because there are certain things in this book that I wouldn't do. There are certain things that I wouldn't say. Yeah. So like, for example, the uncle takes a very even-handed approach about the Civil War. In my opinion, I'm not that even-handed. I'm really not. But I'm not trying to, be didactic about that and say, well, these are my opinions. That's what I have Countercurrents for, right? Yeah. So I guess that's the best way I can answer the question.
Very well. Brant, any reactions to these topics? I'm just wanted to let you chime in a bit.
I just want to point out that Slots is a slacker. And so he's trying to make up for his laziness by asking a lot of questions. I think that's important to say.
Yeah, so we do banter and we jab and rib each other here in the white positive community because we're having fun.
I think it's just great to see this talent coming together. The work that you've done over the course of your life, Donald, the work that Spencer's done over the course of his life. You guys obviously work together well. You have a system set up. And it's great, and I'm glad that there's going to be several follow-up novels or novellas or whatever you call these.
Awesome sauce. So, yeah. There's a great future here as well. It's Actually, I think we did discuss like what would this look like as a graphic novel too. I think it lends itself really, really well to that medium, or it would lend itself well, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
we also, I would love to explore that once we can get, I haven't seen the sales figures and I don't know how well it's doing, although I've been getting tremendous feedback and it's all positive. It's just wonderful. Let's see how well this does and how well the sequel does. And if we can sustain it, then, a graphic novel might be in the works because that's a much more expensive endeavor. And Donald and I were also floating the idea one day of doing like a daily comic. I don't know where we could do it, like maybe 5 panels or 4 panels, like, Peanuts, that kind of thing, Garfield,
Yeah.
except the No College Club, it'll be like a strip, that sort of thing. I mean, there are options, and I want to get this thing going as much as I can before we explore that sort of thing. But yeah, that's definitely in the future if things keep going well.
Awesome. So my very good friend Ulfric Durenson is in the chat, and he has asked probably the most important question, which is what platforms can we find this on?
Right now, it's just in hardcover. I don't think Tony at the White People Press is doing an ebook. Maybe that's in the future, but right now, the only way you can get the book is by purchasing it from the White People's Press or from Amazon. I don't know if it's going to be at Barnes and Noble or any other bookseller, but those are the 2 ones that it's available on now.
So I guess I'm wondering if Countercurrents, like, do they link to it, or how does that work? Because you're associated with Countercurrents, I think, mostly.
Right. They Well, I mean, they will post links in all my articles to all my works, but not all at the same time. So it'll be Charity's Blade or White Like You or Solzhenitsyn in the Right or this one, and so there will always be links. And hopefully, Greg's going to put up a link to my website, which is almost done. I need to discuss art with you about that, Donald, which hopefully be Monday or Tuesday. But SpencerJQuinn.com is almost ready. And hopefully there'll be a sponsored link there, as well as a link to the No College Club product page on the White People Press. So if you go to Countercurrents, you won't have to do a whole lot of clicking before you find it.
Sure. Brilliant. Brant, any closing comments or sparks you want to fly off before we wrap it up here?
No, I just want to say thank you to both of you guys for asking me to come on here and make some comments about it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's great stuff, and I'm glad that it's been created.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I can't understate the work that Brent is doing with School of the West. The link is below the show in the show notes. So please do go investigate his work as a teacher, creating white positive education for homeschooling and beyond. It's an ever expanding program. I've looked at a lot of the videos myself, and the quality of the content is excellent. He's an absolute gem in our sphere, and also a pretty funny and cool guy on top of it. So it's really great to have you here. I think there's a really cool chemistry with the 3 of us, actually. Spencer, just fabulous to have you on. I'm so happy to hear about all the success that you're having with the book. I would ask everyone who watches the show to please share the links, leave a comment, follow the links that I have in the show notes, and support Spencer and Brent. So any last words there, Spencer, before we close up?
Thank you very much for having me. This is a great talk. Hopefully it'll be one of many more. Thank you for doing the art. You did a fantastic job. Your versatility and just the eye for detail, and it was just, I'm just over the moon with how well this turned out. I'm very excited about it. And just thank you all. Thank you to all the readers and all the feedback I've been getting. It's been wonderful.
Beautiful. And lastly, thank you to the audience for coming and sharing, etc., and the great questions. So everybody have a wonderful evening, and we will see you on the internets. Good night.